In Fort McMurray tonight, residents are seeing firsthand the damage done by floodwaters this week. An ice jam along the Athabasca River caused a sudden rise in water, forcing 13,000 people to flee their homes. Global's Breanna Karstens-Smith is in Fort McMurray as residents return. Breanna?
This is what so many front yards in downtown Fort McMurray look like right now. For the first time, residents are getting a chance to see the damage from the flooding this weekend. The damage is extensive. In one case, a resident tells me he thinks he had about 8 feet of water in his basement. Many people saying they're not even bothering to try to save anything because it is all just too waterlogged. But in one case, we spoke with a man who found a box of trinkets from his time in the military, a happy finding in a time when he needed a little bit of hope. We're hearing two main things from people on this street, mostly that they didn't have enough time to prepare. None of these homes were protected by sandbags. They say they weren't given enough warning. The second thing we're hearing is that they do not think they're going to get any help from their insurance companies. Many people could use a bit of financial help right now. This is a region so reliant on oil, and oil prices are dropping rapidly. Also, they're impacted by COVID-19. Many people laid off or have lost their jobs. And this comes at a time when people are still reeling from the Fort McMurray wildfire 4 years ago on Sunday. So this is an anniversary that is hard to mark right now. And a natural disaster, once again, Fort McMurray is cleaning up from. Breanna Karstens-Smith, Global News in Fort McMurray.
As floodwaters begin to subside around Fort McMurray, cleaning up will just be half the battle for residents. The COVID-19 pandemic remains a threat, and infectious disease experts warn this could be a risky time. As Heather Yourex-West explains, the community needs to stay cautious as it tries to pick up the pieces.
18-year-old Hannah Wolowski had planned to spend the summer isolating with her family in Fort McMurray.
I was in Kelowna for university for my first year and then came back in late March to be with my family through the pandemic.
But when water began to fill Wolowski's childhood home, those plans changed.
I'm staying with one of my really good friends, and then my parents and the dog are staying with one of their good family friends.
To have the flood on top of what's happening with the COVID is really horrifying in some ways.
Alberta health officials have put measures in place to reduce the risk of an outbreak. Evacuees have been put up in hotels and motels instead of crowded shelter spaces. But it's when the water recedes and people return to clean up that the risk of an outbreak may start to rise.
People are just gonna say, screw it, we need to get this done anyway. And some people will wear masks and stuff and try and maintain their distance, but at some point, what's more important?
In 2013, when flooding ravaged southern Alberta, the community of High River rallied to help their neighbors. Social distancing wasn't a concern. This time around, anyone wanting to lend a hand will need to take precautions.
I think when you cannot maintain the physical distancing, this is where those other measures come in as an absolute critical defense.
Dr. Jenny says volunteers will need proper PPE. He also recommends people be restricted to bubble zones so that if an outbreak happens, it stays contained. And testing. Testing will be key.
Given the risk of an outbreak, we need to be sure we're in there testing people regularly, and not just people with symptoms.
The good news is there aren't many cases of COVID-19 in the region right now. Experts say it will just take vigilance to ensure it stays that way. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
The new series that goes inside the COVID-19 pandemic, from the front lines to the everyday heroes helping us cope with the unprecedented change. Coronavirus, the new reality. A Global News special, Sundays at 7 on Global.